want to offer a very big thank you to our sponsor and the host for this evening there in person, PAE. It's a wonderful building. It's a wonderful group of people. They're always very supportive of our programming and our events. So we're really appreciative, and please, again, offer a thank you to everybody there at PAE. Not only that, but they also got our catering delivered for the night and took care of those things there in person. So if you're there, please enjoy the snacks and drinks and have a good evening there. And then tonight we have the pleasure of hearing from Dave Oddie, AIA. He is principal at Holst Architecture, and Jeff Beckford, the associate principal at PAE, about this project. And they are going to introduce themselves, and I'll take it from here. So I'm going to stop sharing and let them take over.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to switch computers here. And bear with me a minute. See if we can get this all set up here. So can someone confirm that they can see this online?
Yes.
Great. Well, yeah, I'll introduce myself just really briefly. Not going to expand on what you just said, but I'm Jeff Beckford with PAE, associate principal. I've been with PAE for 19 years. Sadly, I recently relocated to Los Angeles, but I love Portland, and we'll be coming back often. And I'm really super proud and excited to be part of the Multnomah East County Library project. I've been involved with a number of projects around Portland, and like I said, it's bittersweet for me a little bit, but I love this project. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to do the nuts and bolts here initially. We already shared some of the learning objectives. Really hope you walk away with these 4 things, really understanding how we kind of engaged with the community at large to develop this project that wasn't our idea. And that comes through. I think you're going to get that a lot when you see what Dave is sharing. We also want you to understand some of the resiliency that's a factor in this building, as well as operational and embodied carbon. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of you understand that already, but maybe you'll come away with a little bit better understanding. And then how we're achieving some of the energy goals that were established for the county going in. So those are essentially what we're going to talk through: sustainability, resilience, carbon, energy, and some follow-up at the very end with a little bit of discussion about how that works with some of the sustainability frameworks that we talked about on this project. And I'm going to move a little fast, but I do want to pause and do a land acknowledgement. This has been an important part of the project from the get-go, and I think it's important to do here today as well. So I'm going to read this. We acknowledge that we are located on lands that have been occupied and stewarded since time immemorial by people from the bands of Chinook, Clackamas, Cowlitz, Kalapuya, Cathlamet, Multnomah, Molalla, Tualatin, and Wasco. Just want to acknowledge that we are not the first people here. So again, I'm going to move fast. We're going to hand it over here in a minute to Dave, but I did want to share one aspect that we talked about early on about sustainability. The land acknowledgement is about the past, but there is a future to this property. And one principle that we shared early on in a charrette that I think I at least resonated really greatly with me is this Iroquois philosophy that in every deliberation and decision, we must consider the impact of our decisions on the next 7 generations. So I think for me, that really speaks to sustainability and the future and making sure this is something that's going to be there for a really long time. And we want the decisions that we make from the get-go to really have that perspective project. So here's where I'm going to step away and let Dave talk a little bit more about the project. Did you want to talk at all about the design process? Sure. Going in?
Hi everybody, nice to see you. I'm Dave Oddie. I'm a principal and owner at Holst Architecture. I've been there since 2005, and in a previous life I got to work with Patty Tillett at CGF, who designed this beautiful building we're at. I'm honored to be here, and thanks for having me. So Holst got involved with the East County Library when we were awarded the contract through a competitive process back in April of 2022, so a little over a year ago. And what you're seeing on the screen here around validating, engaging and fact finding, synthesizing, integrating, this has been a whirlwind. There had been no programming done on the project when we started, and we're already in the ground, digging out the garage. And so it's been a whirlwind of a design process that also had a very robust community engagement process overlaid on top of it. So we've kind of been going full bore ever since we got the notice to proceed, and trying to keep all of these things front of mind, what the community needs, what the library needs, what the future needs, and how do we make the best use of this incredible public investment in East County. You all voted for the library bond back in 2020. And the flagship library is a centerpiece of that bond. Multnomah County Library has been a national leader in terms of circulation per capita, in terms of engagement with their community for decades. And Bailey Elke, the library director, has been instrumental in Multnomah County Library's success. But one thing that she always likes to point out is that their success with engagement and community involvement has always dwarfed their physical space. The physical space in Multnomah County Library has been woefully low for the size of county that we have. And she always jokes that you can take all of the libraries in Multnomah County, and if you stack them together, you could fit them inside the Seattle Public Library, like physically with volume. So she knew that there needed to be a major investment in new physical space for the libraries to match the wonderful programming that they do. And the other piece, if you go to the next slide, is where should those libraries go? And especially where should the main flagship library go? And they identified probably about 10 years ago that 40% of the county's population lives east of 205, of I-205, but only 20% of the library space existed east of 205. So there was a great inequity in where libraries existed for our community. And obviously we have the downtown library here. There's some really wonderful branches in the neighborhoods in Portland. But Gresham was significantly underserved in terms of physical space. So they knew they wanted the flagship to be in East County and trying to right that wrong of previous generations. So the site that we're showing here, you can see ECL right in the middle, that stands for East County Library. They wound up finding a parking lot, very underutilized parking lot that is owned by TriMet. And they have formed a partnership both with TriMet and the city of Gresham to locate the flagship on that parking lot. We're just to the south of Gresham City Hall, wedged in between the Max Blue line and the new Division Street rapid bus line that just got installed. So it's extremely well served by transit. Eastman Parkway is the major street running north-south that is probably one of the major thoroughfares that goes through Gresham. And so it's also a very highly visible site, and one that the neighborhood and the community knows well. We're about equidistant between the old downtown of Gresham to the southeast, and to the new development happening in Civic Drive to the northwest. And so we're well situated to be sort of a catalyst project for both the resurgence of downtown Gresham and the new developments happening in Civic Drive. We're also very close to the Rockwood neighborhood, which is the most diverse neighborhood in the county, and also has the highest levels of poverty in the county. So wanting to be as close to Rockwood as possible to help support that neighborhood was important too. So we got the site and started to get to work on how we were going to design the urban response, the landscape, the overall site design concept. It's a relatively large site. It's larger than what we needed for the library. And I mentioned TriMet owned this park and ride, and so they also still have a vested interest in the future of the site as well. And then also Gresham has interest in its connectivity for its streets. And so what we did was break the site into 3 parcels. We have in red is the library parcel. And then you'll see it says TOD parcel at 25,000 square feet. That's for future transit oriented development, which most likely will be affordable housing with mixed uses. And then along the north edge of the site, going along the blue line, is what was supposed to be a street in Gresham street plan, but through working with their planners, with working with TriMet, working with the community, we all identified that maybe a street for cars was not the best response, and then maybe we could create a place for people rather than cars. And so that will be a pedestrian and bike only zone along the north edge of the library. And so then another piece of the puzzle was trying to figure out how we get people to interact with the frontages of the library. And the library won't really have any back door or any backside. It has 4 sides that all front major public thoroughfares. Eastman to the east, Division to the south, the light rail to the north, and then a new pedestrian connection that we're calling the north-south. We now call it the spine, but the north-south connection that will connect the light rail stop to the max stop to the bus stop to the south. And so people will be able to walk on all 4 sides of this building without ever having encountered a back door. Loading vehicular access will go underground off of Ava Lane from the west to a below grade parking structure and loading bay, including the tall library trucks. Oops, went too far. And so then we wanted to show a diagram that kind of explains the overall concept of how the building would get laid out, that also then impacts the site design. And we broke the building up into a few different zones. We wanted to make sure you could get into this building very easily from multiple locations. So there's 2 main entries, one on the north, one on the south. That north-south spine that I was mentioning that connects through the middle of the site, that is really where we see the place where the public can engage with the library, where the most public aspects of the library will be. And then the middle of the library is really where the stacks and the books will be for exploring, and then focus areas, places of quiet, places of being alone or being retrospective are along the east with views out to Mount Hood. And then I think, let's see, what was the piece I wanted to say about engage? Well, I'm sure it'll come to me as we keep talking. Oh, that's what I also wanted to say. One of the things we recognized very early on was the high amount of wind that exists out in Gresham. If you've ever spent much time in Gresham, it can be very windy from the gorge. And part of why we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on that north-south spine is because we're trying to use the building as a windbreak to shield from the easterly winds. And so the entrances are on the west. Oops, this one goes fast. So then here's a plan view of that parquet diagram with some site forces overlaid on top of it, so you can see the 2 circles for where we enter, the areas of flow, the areas to gather and participate, and then really along Division and Eastman, we're trying to create a rich pedestrian experience, but that's not where the entries are, and so it's more of a landscape experience as you walk along the building. And I should mention Place is our landscape architect, great partner. Here you can see a cutaway plan section of the first floor. And so you'll see this, this is that north-south spine coming through here, the ramp down to the garage below. One really interesting program element that was added early on was that of an auditorium, about a 250-seat auditorium. Through community engagement, we recognize that there are not very many places for people to gather in East County, especially folks that can't afford to pay for space. And so Bailey and the library team and the design team really wanted to try to find ways to infuse as many gathering spaces and connect places for the community to connect in this building. And the auditorium is a really big piece of that. There's no other room like that in the library system here in Multnomah County. And especially out in Gresham, it's very hard to find spaces where you can have presentations. So that became a sort of an organizing element that is a central piece to the library. And then you can kind of see how that party of engage and explore and then focus kind of lays out in the floor plate. This is the second floor. The building is organized around a large double height space in the middle that has a lot of daylight coming in from clear stories above. And then upstairs we have a lot of the stacks in circulation. Quiet rooms. We also have an audio visual studio, and then staff space is in this northwest corner. I'll also note the entries are formed by these very large covered porches, which are almost like their own program elements, where we can have outdoor programming throughout most of the year because they'll be under cover and protected. So I'm just going to give a really quick tour around the building and then go inside, and then we'll hand it off to Jeff to talk about the meat and potatoes of this presentation, which is the systems, the resiliency, and the energy reduction. But this is a view looking to the east. If downtown Gresham is beyond, and you can see that auditorium in the middle. We are planning for a rather large roof deck on top. The auditorium and roof deck will be able to be open after hours and have after hour events, potentially for rent. They're still trying to figure out if that's something that the library can manage. But it should be a great asset for the community. I'm going to start at the turnaround where there was supposed to be a street, but now it's a pedestrian zone that we call the South Civic Hub. We've been working with NARA Northwest, the Native American Rehabilitation Association, as a sponsor to get a Nature in Neighborhoods grant to really increase the amount of, I would say, like the richness of that space that we can afford to do with lighting, with better paving, with more furniture, and really create a beautiful civic space between the light rail and the library. And this is sort of in the middle of that civic space, looking back towards the north porch. And then you can see the auditorium in the background. This is looking down that north-south spine that connects to the bus stop to the south. We have a series of outdoor spaces. These are protected children's play areas that are behind some curved walls that you get to from inside the library. So we kind of have, layers of space from very public to semi-private throughout the project. This is looking as you headed south on Eastman, and this is the entry to that South Civic Hub. And this is that landscape experience I was mentioning, where we don't have entries to the library on this side of the building, but we do have a rich experience with nature as you walk along the sidewalk. Some stopping places. We have a lot of nurse logs that will populate around the edge of the building as impromptu places to sit and for nature to slowly take over. And this is looking at the intersection of Division and Eastman. We do have a significant amount of money dedicated to solar panels that Jeff will talk about that are also going to be tied to a battery system, which is pretty cool. Here you can see at the southwest corner of the project, that's the south porch. We do have, because the library wants to all be at a single level for universal access, we do wind up with some grade challenges on the south side of the site, about 4 feet between the sidewalk and where the finished floor of the library will be. So we're trying to use that as an opportunity to create a series of outdoor rooms and spaces that can be programmed in different ways throughout the year and make that an elegant transition as opposed to just a large set of stairs. Trying to find ways for everybody to be able to access the library easily, whether you're walking or on wheels. It's sort of that southwest corner, looking back at the bus stop and the south porch. And so now, as you go inside the library, this is the south lobby. The north lobby is sort of a mirror image of this. We can start to get a sense of materiality inside the building. It's all mass timber and CLT. And we're working through a lot of the details right now, but it's a pretty exciting opportunity to really elevate our game when it comes to how we detail and specify our timber. We're working with Timber Lab as our subcontractor. And the palette of the building is really quite simple. It's mostly wood with a little bit of concrete for floors and foundations, and a little bit of metal here and there for access or accent points like the stair or the roof coping. But a very limited palette of as few materials as possible. We really want to infuse natural colors, natural materials, and biophilia into the library. I mentioned other spaces that we've heard about from the community. Makerspace is another big hit that we're hearing a lot about, and so we're going to have a very large makerspace workshop right off of the south entry, right off the south porch. We'll actually have the ability to open out into that porch and kind of an indoor-outdoor experience. Multnomah County Libraries had a really successful program at the Rockwood Library with a makerspace, and this is modeled on that, only about 3 times the size. I should say this library will be comparable in size to the downtown Portland Library. We're at about 95,000 square feet. And I'm sure a lot of you worry about the budget. So right now we're sitting at about $99 million. This is the children's play area that opens up to one of those curved wall protected outdoor spaces. And then the auditorium, we are really excited about the idea of the auditorium being able to be activated or have the auditorium activate that north-south spine with events that have this sort of indoor-outdoor interaction and to spark people's curiosity and wonder and desire to come into the library to see what's going on. And then eventually go up to the roof and get some amazing views of Mount Hood and be an amenity that doesn't exist in many places in East County. So that's my nickel tour. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jeff to talk about the rest of the presentation.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, and I wanted to circle back on the engagement process real quick too. One of the things that we learned working on this project early on was there were a lot of people that had a lot of opinions and a lot of input that they wanted to provide. And so, and the language that we use as engineers are not the language that people use a lot of times, and just their daily language, the way they talk about things. And so we met with a library user group pretty early and some charettes to talk about sustainability. And one of the first things we did was, what does sustainability mean to you? We kind of defined some things for them, talked about sustainability, some of the different factors and aspects of sustainability. But what we really wanted to get out of that group was, what's most important to you? And so this word cloud is one thing that we came out of that meeting with. We actually did a survey and allowed people to put in as many words as they wanted of what sustainability meant to them. And this is what we get. And so if you're not familiar with the word cloud, it populates all the words that are put into that survey. And the bigger the word means more people actually use that word. And so you'll see some things coming out of this that we determined were really the priorities for the county, for the library. Resiliency being a big part of it. And we obviously will define that here a little bit later, what that really means, but carbon was another thing you see, and the different variations of the word also pops up. Carbon, energy, equity, solar, carbon offsetting. So things repeat, and so you start to get an idea of what we should pursue as goals. So I wanted to focus on that before moving on to the rest of the sustainability pieces of this project, because we really wanted it to be something that the county was proud of, and we addressed a lot of their priorities. So resiliency being front and center, the big word there that people really focused on. So we actually had a follow-up charrette about this, knowing where the results came through that initial word survey. What is resiliency? And what we wanted to do with that process was define, okay, what are you really looking to do with resiliency in this building? What kind of event does that really mean we're responding to? Because resiliency can do a lot of different things. Just like sustainability has a wide definition, resiliency also has a wide definition. So we needed to focus that in on what that means. Does that mean we're going to simply be able to respond to an outage for electricity or water? Are we talking about a severe weather event? Are we talking about the big one, the big earthquake that we're all expecting at some point? Or is it about the summer fires that we're experiencing on an annual basis? And then what does that mean for what do you want to operate while that event is occurring or after that event happens? So it was an important thing to really discuss, because that really gets into how do you design your systems, mechanical systems, to respond to fires with filtration. With earthquakes, does that mean you want backup water? Does that mean you want to back up power for it to operate independently? Severe weather, how should that building respond to severe weather events again that we experience now on an annual basis with the heat? So these are all conversations that we felt that we needed to have with the user groups in order to find. And so that really helped us to determine kind of the system basis that we should pursue. And then the next step of that evolution is, how long are we talking about? Is this for people to be able to be getting out of the building in a timely manner, give them some time to get out of the building after an event? Is it something we want the building to actually remain in operation for a little bit longer period of time for people to shelter in place for either a short-term or a long-term period? Or do we want to be able to operate the building indefinitely? Like, for those of you who have experienced this building, the Portland Living Building or PAE Living Building is actually one of those off-grid situations. Do we want to go to that level with the library? That was a question that we had. And so, how you pursue that with the systems then is the next step. Is now that you've defined the goals, how do you achieve that? And so I'm not answering that question intentionally just yet. We'll get to that. And so resiliency of the building. There are other aspects that also play into it as well. There are other non-mechanical system decisions that you can make with regards to the envelope, with the daylighting, the amount of light that you get into the building during the day, that you can actually leverage your building to be more resilient. If you have a well-insulated building, well sealed, you can insulate yourself from some of those weather events that you're having. Daylighting, you can actually take advantage of the daylighting during the daytime hours in order to compensate for a power outage, let's say. So those are all things that you need to think about with resiliency and what you're trying to achieve. And so on this project, as Dave did mention, we do have also a 1.5% budget that we need to actually pursue solar panels on the project. And so that's one big factor for this project. We do have that budget in a sense to provide that PV system. We do have it on the roof. You see it in the renderings pretty prominently, a lot of PV there. But in order to maintain operation of the building in a power outage, you actually need to have more than that. You need to have a battery storage system. And so again, that's another aspect, another system that this project will have. So there are other grant sources as well. They've mentioned the budget, but we are pursuing grants as well to fund portions of these systems in order to maintain a resilient building. And so yes, this building will have a PV system. It's going to have a microgrid, and it will be able to operate for a period of time when the power is out for the building. So it'll really be a magnet for people in that vicinity. If the power's out, the library is still actually going to be operating. They can come to the library as a place of refuge in a sense, even though it's not technically designed to be a area of refuge, but it'll still be a magnet. Maybe real quick before I get into that, the rest of that. So we did spend a lot of time optimizing the envelope as well. And then you saw the overhangs in some of the renderings. That is going to do a lot of work to limit the solar heat gain within the building. And so that's an important factor as well, because at different facades, you're going to have a major solar heat gain, which will affect your indoor comfort. And so you're able to bridge more time of maintaining a comfortable indoor environment if you have a lot of shading, which we do have with those major overhangs, which is really good, which we studied. So now I want to define, switch gears a little bit. We talked about resiliency, switch gears to carbon and define that a little bit. There are some aspects to carbon I want to make sure people understand. So how do buildings themselves contribute to greenhouse gas emissions? And really they contribute in 3 different ways. Embodied carbon, that's the one that really entails all the materials that go into the building. So we haven't talked a lot about it, and Dave didn't really mention the wood structure, but the major carbon footprint of a building typically is that initial structure of the building. So wood, like this building here, wood is actually a carbon negative for the total carbon footprint of the building, because it's been sequestering carbon in the life of the trees that are being used for the structure of the building. Other materials like steel, concrete, those are major sources of carbon just to produce that material. And so embodied carbon is one of those things that people are looking a lot closer at. And wood is a pretty big, attractive material in order to minimize your carbon footprint for your project. But there are also other things. There's the steel and the HVAC systems. There's all the finishes that go into the building. So all those things, there's a growing movement to really analyze the full carbon footprint of that material before it even goes into the building. The second piece of carbon that I think people understand a little bit more about is the operational carbon side of things. That's the energy that you use in order to heat, cool, provide lighting, and operate the building in a sense. So it's the bills that you pay on a yearly basis. It's pretty easy to think about that. And so that your carbon footprint grows over time. I'll show you a graphic that illustrates that in a minute. And then carbon offsets are the third thing. And that's those things that you can do to offset those operational carbon footprint that you have. And then I'll say there is actually a fourth. I'm not showing it here, but the fourth is actually we would call as a circular economy. And that's what happens to those materials at the end of its life. And so again, we're not talking about that today, but that's a fourth aspect that we're starting to think about. And so what does it really look like on a building? So a building like this, like let's say a typical building, the gray bar here, embodied carbon, that happens day one, right? You build the building, you got a carbon footprint right off the bat. And then you have operational carbon over time. So your carbon footprint grows. And you have a couple ways you can do. You can build it per code, and it's going to have a certain growth of carbon footprint. Or you can do a better building than code. So your line is still growing, but it's a little flatter. And then you have also something else to take into account, and that's the greening of the grid. I don't know who is familiar with the House bills that have been passed for Oregon, but Oregon is mandated to green the grid. And so over time, we will have a carbon neutral electrical grid. And so one of the things that you can do to help your carbon footprint is electrify your building, which will then become greener and greener over time. And that's that third bar, 2R. And then ultimately going net zero. So what net zero means is that you're essentially locking in your carbon footprint to not expand beyond your embodied carbon. And so that's ultimately one of our goals, is to see more net zero buildings go into production. And then you can draw down, which means you're generating more power than what you actually use. And so you're actually taking a chunk every year out of the carbon footprint that you've produced when you did build the building. So aspirational, that's regenerative design. And so that looks kind of like this. So if I were to give you a path to that net zero carbon, this is the path I would give you. Is it's minimize your carbon footprint, one from the start, analyzing your materials. It's minimizing your operational carbon as well. Decarbonizing by going all electric. Looking for the most efficient way to produce the heating and cooling you need. And so those are technologies within the mechanical system. And then it's to pursue those carbon offsets that you can purchase. And that's the carbon cycle. All right, I'm moving pretty fast. Hopefully leave us enough time with some questions at the end. But so energy, here's where we'll focus a little bit more on the efforts that we made towards the energy, the operational carbon of the building. And so we would like to take a number of steps in order to pursue reduction in energy. So the first thing, which we're actually going to talk about last on this one, is in this presentation, is set inspiring goals. Really, you need a North Star for any project. You need to know what your goals are. We set that with the library user group initially, as I mentioned in some of the early charettes. And really, you need to stay true to that goal once you set it. And then as we then pursue the design to determine the most effective pathway, there are a number of things you can do. Analyzing the climate is one thing. Take advantage of the resources that you have, essentially is what I like to think of it as. And then from there, reducing your loads. And so we do that a number of different ways we'll talk about. And then choosing efficient systems, I want to make sure it's important to note that's not the first thing you do, that's actually down the line. Choosing efficient systems is necessary, but it's not the first thing you do. You do all these other things before you get to picking the best system you can. And then once you've done that, you've minimized what your load is going to be, what your capacities are. That's the time then to implement renewable sources for that energy, because it's then going to be the most cost effective. And then you need to make sure you actually perform in doing what you're doing. So that's an important last step that you should pursue. And so talking a little bit about the climate, this is really an early effort for us to determine what we can do from a passive design standpoint. We have a very temperate climate in Portland. It's a great place to live because of that. We're not the north of the Southwest. We're not the Southeast, the Northeast, which have very extreme climates. We have a big time of the year where we can actually pursue passive design, whether that be natural ventilation, whether that be utilizing your mechanical system even to provide what we call economizer air into the building. And so it's really utilizing the outdoor air into the building. And so if you can expand that passive zone, that even takes bigger advantage of preventing your active heating and cooling. So you can do that by expanding your comfort range. That's one strategy we talk a lot about, as well as using those passive things like shading, overhangs, in order to then also make people feel comfortable. Radiant temperatures is another thing that we attack here in this category by pursuing an overall full comfort value in a space. So it's not just temperature within the building, it's actually other factors that lead to people being comfortable. It's the temperature of surfaces. It's also creating air movement within the space that then also expands your passive zone of conditions within a building. So again, but you can't go into that without analyzing what your climate is. So it's an important first step. And then envelope optimization. Envelope optimization is really goes into a lot of different things. building tightness being a really important one. A tight building design, minimizing the air infiltration within the building will actually make the building much more comfortable, as well as save a lot of energy. Analyzing various R values for the walls to optimize that. The window sizes to optimize between daylighting. We want to daylight the space, and you see we accomplished a very well daylit space, but it's also a weak spot in the thermal envelope of the building. So hitting that sweet spot between the two things is important. As well as ensuring that you're handling the glare within the building with appropriate shades, which will then also result in people being comfortable because you're minimizing the solar gain within the space. As well as the views. We want to make sure we've got a lot of great views within this building. And so that's an important aspect as well. You want people to see the nature and the landscaping that we have outdoors as well, and to feel that we've kind of accomplished the expanded biophilia within the building by getting those views. And so benchmarking is the next important piece for us to do, to determine where we are with regards to historic performance of a building, how much opportunity we have for solar in a building, and what we expect the building performance to be. So this graphic illustrates what a typical far left energy use index, for those of you who don't know, this is the energy footprint really of the building. And you can see a historic building is 104 energy use index, so it's a pretty inefficient building historically. We do have good information from the library. We were able to determine that the existing central library currently has an EUI of 61, so quite a bit better than historic, but still a little bit worse than what a code building would be, which would be about a 43. And then comparing a few other metrics, Architecture 2030 is something that we pursue on every project. And so it's important to know that's an 80% reduction from historic values. So that results in an 81 now, and that's just where we are with that 2030 challenge. And that's about what we feel a LEED Platinum building would perform at. And then interestingly enough, if we spend all of our 1.5% budget on solar panels, which actually more than cover the roof of the building, we would get about a 24 EUI. So really, what it shows you is that we were pretty close to net zero when we pursue full 1.5% solar on this building. That's 1.5% of the total budget of the project. And so again, we're pretty close from a benchmarking standpoint to that net zero stage, which actually I don't have again on this chart, but hot off the presses, our energy use index that we're projecting right now is at that 24 point. So we are right there at our budget before PV is applied. And so now we get into selecting efficient systems. So now that we've optimized the envelope, we've analyzed passive systems, here are the nuts and bolts of what we're actually going to be incorporating into the design of the building. First of all, a dedicated outside air system. We want to make sure that we have a well-ventilated building. We are pursuing well-ventilated systems and filtration to address the wildfire issues that we have on an annual basis. So filtration has been a big conversation. We'll have that dedicated outside air system, so it's actually not recirculating air. So again, we're pursuing a high indoor air quality. It's also in relation to COVID. We've all coming out of COVID. People want to know, how are we ventilating the building? Again, it's a non-recirculated system, so that we're getting that fresh air throughout the building. It also has heat recovery, and so we're recovering the energy from the exhausted air back into that ventilation air being brought back in. So again, it's a very efficient way to reintroduce outside air. We're also decoupling heating and cooling, and that's important in terms of energy reduction. because the outside air can react to the ventilation requirements within the building, so it can vary based on occupancy. While the temperature control can operate independently and heat and cool the space as you need it to be heated and cooled. And it can be done in a more efficient way than doing it through the air. And the way that we're doing that is by a combination of radiant floor systems as well as perimeter heating and cooling. And so the perimeter heating and cooling system, the product that a lot of people are familiar with is a Yaga type system. And those have convectors, fans that actually do move air through the convector. And so we can do heating and cooling with that instead of just heating, which you see with a lot of perimeter systems. So it's an improvement on that system. And it's a very efficient way to heat and cool, particularly the envelope load. We want to take care of all that solar heat gain at the perimeter, as well as the thermal transfer through the envelope at that point. So it doesn't even get into the building through the rest of the building. And then, as I said, the radiant floor will take care of the rest of the heating and cooling within the building. And then the source of that heating and cooling system is a very efficient air source heat pump. And so air source heat pumps are a really efficient way to exchange air from outdoors to a water based system within the building. So that's how we're handling that. I also mentioned the perimeter shading. It's doing a lot of work. It's allowing us to downsize our systems greatly in order to make that system work. As I mentioned, we also have the solar PV system with the battery storage, and then the clear stories, which is going to get a lot of light within that interior atrium space, and is going to save a lot of lighting energy.
Jeff, before you leave this slide, I wanted to point out a few things sort of the architects. You'll see the clean detailing on the ceiling, which we're working very hard right now to maintain. It's quite a challenge, as you can imagine, but we're trying to keep all of the airflow in the plenum of the second floor.
Yes.
So the second floor sandwich you'll see has drop ceilings. So most of the air distribution is all happening in that second floor sandwich to try and keep as much stuff off the roof as possible. And then there was a really big decision point probably about 3 months ago in DD around whether or not we were going to be able to afford the radiant floor. So like the room we're sitting in right now, this has radiant heat under the slab. It was about $1 million, maybe $1.5 million upcharge to go from forced air to a radiant slab. And that was a very big decision point because our budget was already very constrained and we were in cost saving mode. And we basically had to have a all hands meeting. And Jeff did a great job of presenting the pros and cons. But the key to getting the county to going forward with the radiant floor was a couple things. One, it was their buy-in to the aesthetics of what the space should be and trying to not have ductwork everywhere. And then the other one that is actually more meaningful is the long-term operating costs and how efficient that radiant floor will be. And so having the people in the room that also look at operation costs, not just upfront development costs, and having the developers talking to the operators was super crucial to making that decision. Back to Jeff's original thought about thinking 7 generations ahead, rather than just how do we get this building under budget right now. And so the county made the commitment to up the budget to pay for the radiant floor after a really thoughtful discussion and process. And so I just wanted to call that out because PAE was huge to get into that decision with all of their analysis and explanation. And then the Multnomah County was huge in the decision, and I think, providing some real wisdom. There's a question here. It would have been helpful to show the forestry factors so we can better understand. We'll take a look at the chat a little bit. So anyway, I just wanted to add a little bit of that context because that was a really big moment for the project.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was a pretty pivotal moment for us. Yeah, and I think getting back to that and maybe just expanding very briefly on that is the systems that we were considering as alternates had a different lifespan that were more along the 15 to 20 years. And it was impactful to potentially having to replace that system in that time frame. So the building operations having to take portions or maybe even all of the building down for a period of time in order to do that replacement, compared to a system that will essentially last the life of the floor slab will. And so replacement of that and the time it'll take to do that was an important factor. So it doesn't come through in the sustainability piece so much, other than it is another embodied material as well to be thinking about, to have to replace that equipment.
It's also hydronic, so it's not using refrigerants, it's using water, so.
Yes, good point, yeah. So the last section that I have, and then we'll hit the questions here in just a second, is sustainability frameworks. And you know, as I mentioned before, sustainability goals are an early focus of ours. And it's important to really establish that because that's the North Star that you have. And so we did do that early. And I'm leaving this for last year, but that was a really early thing to consider. And really where I wanted to take this here and demonstrate to you is the study that we had done on various frameworks. And so I intentionally didn't use the word rating system because they're all different. LEED is one that we're all familiar with, and actually the county is pursuing a LEED rating on this building. So that is, as a result of our analysis, LEED was the pursuit on the project.
Gold at a minimum.
Gold at a minimum.
I think we're tracking platinum right
Yeah, we're doing what we can to hit platinum, but that's the minimum goal for us, is that LEED gold. But we did want to talk about these other frameworks because they have some aspects that we may want to incorporate into the building, whether it be the Well Building Institute, meaning a healthy building and design around the healthy building, whether that be the Living Building Challenge, which the PAE Living Building is meeting, whether that be portions of the ILFI, which is core. And so it's really pursuing aspects of those different frameworks. Passive House being another one of great interest as well, focusing on that envelope design being important, as well as Path to Net Zero, which we pursue with the solar panels. And then Architecture 2030, we're tracking every project to that. And so really we're capturing quite a few pieces of these various rating systems within our design, even though our North Star really truly is a LEED gold building or better. And so we also asked for people's feedback. We provided that information to the group to find it a little bit more closely to decide, is there something more than you want to pursue than just LEED? And so this is the word cloud. And so you did see that when people learned more about these rating systems, there was a lot of interest. Passive House being a big one. And that's again, focused on the envelope. So spending your money to really design the building to be resilient in that aspect, as well as pursuing LEED. So we wanted to then get this out there and pursue these various options. So I think we're doing a good job of that, blending that, but again, our North Star being LEED. So with that, I want to leave kind of with one last inspirational quote that I've seen, and Paul Hawken, who is a pretty inspirational person in the sustainability world. There's a lot of negativity out there sometimes about climate change, and I love his perspective because it's a positive one. And so I'll just read this. It's that the great dilemma we're in is that we get to reimagine every single thing you do. There are two ways of looking at that. So again, one is, oh my gosh, what a big burden. Or the other way, which I prefer, is what a great time to be born. What a great time to be alive. And he's excited because this is our generation that's designing buildings now is the one that really get to change the world, change the way we do things. And so I love that. It's inspirational for me. It gives me hope. So I wanted to end with that. It's always good to end with positive. And we're doing that on as many projects as we can. changing the way we do things. So with that, that's everything. And we do have 2 questions, so I will go to that. Let's see what we've got. So I think we're
Hi,
maybe
Jim
set.
Setzinger in Bend. I just want to comment on the radiant heating. I think that the industry hasn't really caught up with the fact that radiant heating is really easy to install and much easier. It's much easier to push liquid through small dimension pipes in a floor than construct all this ductwork. And the second thing is that by heating the mass, you have better comfort levels than heating or cooling the air. What a great presentation you've done. My question would be, I see a lot of hardscape. What are you doing to address drainage, permeability, and heat island effects?
I'll let Dave answer that question.
Engineers love and architects just take it over, don't they? Let's see, where's the?
It's all part of the collaboration.
There we go. Oh, all right. Let's see, sorry, guys, you gotta make you busy. Stormwater, I'll talk about really briefly because we actually had a super elegant solution come from Gresham, from the city planners. There is a retention pond right here between Gresham City Hall and the Gresham Station Shopping Center that was designed just for that use, to take the entire neighborhood's stormwater and put it into one central pond that will treat that water. And people kind of forgot about it. It was built probably, I'd say 15 years ago. And there was one planner who was in one of our workshops who's like, hey, there's a pond down the street that I think still has capacity. And so then we talked to Jordan Schnitzer and his folks that own the Gresham Station Shopping Center. They're like, sure. We came up with a shared use agreement and we're piping all of our stormwater there. And that actually saved us a ton of money. So that was, and it goes to a natural way of treating the stormwater. So it's really a win-win for the project. What was the second part of your question, Jim?
Heat island.
Oh, heat island, yeah.
Permeability and heat island.
Yep, you bet. So these are slightly old images, but we are, I think the intent is still there. We have a pretty significant amount of vegetation that's wrapping the building on the north, east, and south sides. And the sidewalks are kind of minimized to just what there's more greenery than what's shown here. The sidewalks are minimized to just what we need for the sidewalk corridor. And then along the north-south spine that runs along the west side of the building, that's going to have a significant amount of trees that probably aren't represented as accurately as they should be in this rendering. And so we always want to have a connection to nature from anywhere you're standing in this building, and also to reduce the heat island effect as much as possible. There's always a balance between, like the South Civic Hub, the pedestrian zone to the north of the building. They have visions of that becoming a festival street, right? So we need to have lots of paving areas for food trucks, for vendors, for tents, for all sorts of events that are going to happen there. And so there's always a delicate balance between how much green space do you provide versus paving for events. But I would say that the amount of planting and the budget that the county is accepting for this project for landscape is higher than all of their other branches currently, and it's been a big focus of Place Landscape.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Mohammed had a couple questions at the beginning. Would have been helpful to show the forestry factors so we can better understand how the building EC progress from cradle to grave through 60 to 100-year building life cycle baseline. Thank you. Thank you for saying it's a beautiful presentation. We are planning for this building to be an 80-year building at a minimum. And so all of our life cycle analysis and strategizing around material choices and systems choices has been around that 80-year lifespan. So right now, we're still looking at the plating of the building, but currently we're looking at a UHPC panel, ultra high performance concrete that has a very high lifespan and a relatively low carbon footprint for being a concrete panel. It's a lot lower than some others out there. And we do try to look at the life cycle analysis, you know, of the CLT, of trying to limit how much concrete we've got in the topping slabs. Really working with the MK, our structural engineer, on the size of footings and trying to keep everything as efficient as possible. So anytime we have a chance to do less, we always choose to do less. And then Mohammed, you had a question about homelessness, the building, this one close to the Max line. So this question is near and dear to my heart. If folks know my work, I do a lot of work in and around homelessness, affordable housing, social services. And it's really awesome that I get to work on this library, because libraries are really an extension of our social safety net. And in some ways, libraries are the extreme example of like the most democratic space in our society, right? And it's one of the only places that it belongs to everybody, and anybody can go anytime they want. And it's not just about the books, but it's about the space. It's about being together. And because of that, libraries do bear the brunt of our homelessness crisis more than a lot of buildings do in our society. And librarians have become de facto social service providers. So we've had a lot of discussions about how to manage the building for our neighbors that are experiencing homelessness, how to help people in crisis. We have way too many discussions about fentanyl and meth that will inevitably get smoked in the bathrooms and the hidden spaces of this building. So we've been talking to Jeff about air circulation, about alarms, about ways to detect behavior that we don't want in the library. But at the same time, how do we provide humane spaces for people where this is possibly the best place they get to go in a day? And I truly feel, I don't know if you've read Palaces.
I mean, I agree with you. You know, I think that's why I wanted to ask the question, because, you know, Portland has like a dramatically changed in the past 5 years. And then, I mean, it's kind of awesome that you have a library and it's pretty close to the max, which kind of allow people to kind of get off it and just go inside the building. But at the same time, I mean, you look at the city and everything that's happening. So I feel like, yeah, that's why I asked the question. But overall, I really love the project. I think the project is awesome. And from a urban design perspective, I personally like how it is close to public policy, because I feel like that's important and that's the best way to activate a neighborhood, you know. But then again, yeah, homelessness is something that, you know, I just wanted to try a little bit about it, because it's something that the city has been tackling for a while now. But I agree with your answer. I love it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you.
Ben, you got your hand raised?
Hi, yeah, just wanted to say thank you for the beautiful presentation. It's a gorgeous project, I think. It seems like it's a real community hub in many ways, accessible and with a lot of resources for the community. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the process for community engagement. So just how did that impact the design? How did it work? And then on the other side of the coin is one of the challenges that I've experienced is how do you fit community engagement into the work plan and make sure that you have enough support for your staff to do all that community engagement? So I'm just wondering in general if you could talk a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, those are great questions, Ben. And you're right. Trying to fold in a really robust engagement process without changing the schedule or the budget is a major challenge. We had some great partners early on in the project that helped us a lot. We worked with Multicultural Collaborative, who I think some of you may know, Anita Yap, who's done a lot of engagement around the community. And then we obviously had Ajay Associates on the project through design development, and Pascal Sablon from their office was pretty fundamental in developing our engagement strategy as well. Our engagement idea really centered around forming partnerships with who we call library champions. And so we did some strategic outreach to nonprofits that operate a lot in East County. And we wanted to have like kind of a broad range of perspectives. And so we found 3 nonprofit organizations that we wound up enlisting and paying significant amounts of fee to have ongoing engagement with us and to actually be the conduit to the rest of the community. So we worked with IRCO, the Immigrant and Refugee, someone tell me what the C&O stands for, but they work with a lot of folks coming in from Africa and Asia. We worked with El Programa Hispanica, that's very tied into the Hispanic community and the Latinx community. And then the Black Economic Collective, which is a young burgeoning nonprofit that's focused on economic opportunity for Black folks in Oregon. And so all 3 of those organizations had designated people that were our library champions, and they came to all of our events. They were part of the groundbreaking. And then sort of a side champion is Nara Northwest, who came in for the urban design piece through Gresham. So these nonprofit library champions were a key ingredient to our engagement success. And then I think I just got we're finishing up the DD engagement summary right now. And I think we have totaled over 60 events that we have gone to in the last year. And I think we have engaged over 6,000 individual people. And so it was, you're right, it was a really intense effort that was overlaid on top of an already very intense design process. And so we did have people that were dedicated to that. So Shannon, the project manager in my office, about split her time between managing the project and managing the engagement. We had Hannah Silver in our office, who's our inclusive design facilitator, who spent probably about half of her time for 6 months just organizing these events and organizing the surveys and the information and the reports. And so I would say, I would guess there was probably about maybe 3,000 hours of staff time between Ajay Associates, Multicultural Collaborative, and Holst that went into the engagement of the community for this project. And I've never been a part of something that intentional, nor that fast. And I think, Ben, like, I think the hidden side of your comment or kind of underlying your comment is that projects like these and the clients that want to do them need to take, if they want to do engagement right, they need to build in time and money to do it properly. Because one of the things that we keep finding is we're too late on things that we hear. Like, well, we're already in DD, we can't make that change now. I wish we would have known that 6 months ago. It hasn't been too many of those things, but those things do pop up. And, you know, in other projects I'm working on, that is a continual struggle where we don't have the time or the money to do it right. And so everybody wants to do engagement, but then when they realize that means they have to add 3 to 4, 5, 6 months to their project, and they need to add, you know, $200,000, $300,000 to their budget to pay people properly to do this work. That's a huge lift, and I think it's something that we're grappling with in this new world.
Great, thank you so much.
Dave, I have a question, and that's really about the responsibilities of the civic building. It really is a projection of what the city aspires to become in the future. And when they built their city hall, it was next to Kmart, and it didn't aspire much more than that. Gresham is clearly growing up as a city, and you've managed to give it that civic presence without the self-importance that traditional civic buildings have. But one of the things I really like about it are the 2 porches. I imagine those in cold winter months being just very welcoming and drawing people in. Can you talk a little bit about the responsibility of producing a building which really is something aspirational for the community as a whole?
Well, thank you, Patty, for that. I mean, personally, this is the most important project I've ever been a part of. And I truly think that this is the most important building for Multnomah County in the last 100 years. And I think the fact that we're doing this building where we're doing it in the community that has been frankly forgotten for a very long time, I think speaks volumes to the values that the Multnomah County Library System has, the values that Bailey has that she's brought to the system, and the amount of investment they're willing to make to help this part of our where we live in this world. So the responsibility that we feel to deliver a place that has a sense of civic pride, but at the same time is welcoming to everybody. That's something we've talked a lot about. That so we came up with this concept of me and we. That this building should be a place where we all feel like we're welcomed and that we belong. It should also be a place where we feel we can come together and be together, but it's also a place where we can come by ourselves and be alone and find peace. And so it's this kind of acknowledgement that, you know, the built environment is has to do so many things. It has to support community. It has to support the events that we have and the lives that we lead. But they also, the built environment also affects our psyche as humans and how we think about ourselves and how we think about one another. And so I think that the amount of care that's going into this building by Jeff, by my team, by everybody involved, I think really speaks to the values we have in Multnomah County, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Thank you. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, should we, I don't know if Heather, you said something about. We're happy, Dave and I are happy to stay here. I don't know if we need to.
Yeah, you
stop
guys
the
can
recording.
absolutely, you don't have to. I can stop the recording here if you'd like. If you guys want to just continue in conversation, that's great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you guys formally again and thank PAE for hosting overall. You guys are welcome to continue the conversation. I actually don't have to stay on for that thanks to technology. So I've made Jeff the host now, and you guys can continue on.
Thank you, Heather.
Okay.
No
Thanks.
problem. Have a great
Well,
night.
Yeah, I'm happy to participate in your questions though. Cool. Go ahead.
I just have a question. So when you design the form of the buildings, have you taken consideration of the shopping center and why is the entrance that way? Because I know that's where the Best Buy is and it's the back of the Best Buy. So I'm wondering how that's affecting the views considering it's the main entrance.
That's a great question. And it's something that we talked about a lot. So, yeah, I mean, even like the zoning code for Gresham called to have the front doors on Eastman or Division or both, right? Facing towards downtown, facing the main streets. And we made this decision to kind of flip the building on its side and put the entrances on the west. And you're right, looking at the back of Best Buy and the loading zones and all of that. There's a couple reasons we did that. One, I mentioned the wind and really trying to create microclimates where we have peaceful places for people to come into the building and we're not fighting, you know, doors that won't open and close. The other thing was to get away from the traffic and the noise. And so Eastman's a very busy street, so is Division. So trying to have people come into the building from a place of kind of peace and a people-centered place rather than a car-centered place. And then the other piece is we know that big box is not going to be there forever. There is and there is going to be, you know, this parcel, like I mentioned before, that's going to be an affordable housing mixed use type of building that's going to also become a huge piece of this urban place, right? And it's going to affect what that north-south spine is like. And it will create a bit of a buffer between the library and the shopping center. But we also know that shopping center has a lifespan and it is probably well through its lifespan. And if this building does what it's supposed to do, along with all the other efforts Gresham is making to master plan this area, we hope to see a lot more infill development happening and the shopping center turning into higher density, more residential, more mixed use, that sort of thing. In fact, the Gresham station was designed, back to my, Gresham station was designed to have public streets that actually go through their parking lots, which is a pretty cool idea. Patty, I don't know if that was anything that you had to do with. But they aren't just parking lots, they're actually streets. So it'd be very easy to turn those into building pads where there's now surface parking and do higher density. So basically, long story short, we acknowledge that the building right now is not looking at the most beautiful thing, but it's also why we have really lush landscaping that's going to act as a buffer between there.
I do think it's a great idea to flip it. I think the main entrance in the big street probably not the most welcoming idea. So I do like that it's creating sort of a little pockets for
and
mostly garden space.
And you can see here, this is, place is pretty realistic about what trees are gonna look like early on. But those trees are gonna grow and we're gonna have kind of a almost like an outdoor street or an outdoor hallway through here that feels pretty enclosed.
Thank you, Bobby.
More of a nuts and bolts question. When I think of a resilient building, I think about maintainability and repairability of systems.
Yeah.
And a radiant floor could keep me awake at night. How do you think about it, and what's your feeling about an 80-year building with a radiant floor system?
Yeah, we've seen long lifespans of radiant floor systems. One of the things that we do is ensure there's no joints. When you've got a buried pipe, you don't want something to fail, like a joint will fail. A pipe itself is very unlikely to fail embedded in concrete. As long as you ensure that, one, it's there and you're not putting new walls where you have radiant floor. And so there's some of that needs to go into understanding, so the county knows that they've been part of that conversation. But as long as we maintain kind of that, I'm not concerned about anything failing within the slab itself. There will be surface cracking, and that's gonna happen, that's okay. And that's something that you even see here in this floor, but it's not affecting, the radiant tubing is 1.5 to 2 inches and down from the top of the surface of the concrete. So we've seen them last a really long time. I've incorporated in a number of different radiant floor systems and buildings since I've been at PAE. So it's not 80 years, but they've been around a long time.
More nuts and bolts, John?
No, that's
a good question.
That was really it.
We did talk about the lifespan of that.
Some of the radiant floors I've been familiar with have been remediation problems.
Have they? Yeah, there's some houses
But
built.
you're right, they had joints in the pipes.
Yeah, that's the major failure point typically.
There's a question from John in the chat about a couple of questions. One's about tracking regarding the carbon footprint reduction by using various systems. Is there tracking a carbon footprint in the creation of those systems? That's interesting. So I guess I'm assuming the creation of the air handling units or the creation of the hydronic piping, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that the main thing that comes to my mind is a lot of times we'll be designing a project and saying, oh, we're going to throw solar panels on it, and the solar panels are going to help offset that carbon footprint. And it's almost like there's this magic element that we just placed on the building. And I don't know if there's any tracking of what the carbon footprint of those solar panels are. And that's true of all of the systems, I suppose. A lot of times they say.
Good question, John.
Yeah, we've talked about doing some carbon tracking for the project, and we've not pulled the trigger on that yet, but I think it would be really interesting, because you're right, there are components to the solar system and the battery storage itself that are, they do have a heavy carbon footprint to start from. My understanding is that they are getting better, but they're still carbon heavy. The thing, there are a lot of materials that we do know carbon footprints for and can be tracked pretty easily. A lot of finishes are getting pretty good about carbon tracking. We know what the carbon footprint is for steel, for most wood products. Actually, even wood is questionable. There's a wide range of carbon footprint depending on where the wood's coming from, the species of wood. So that even is a variable. And then another gray area that really is very little known about the carbon footprint is the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. Surprisingly enough, there's not a lot of data yet been compiled on the carbon footprint of those systems, but it's something that we're interested in and we've started researching.
And then, John, you've asked the question about the auditorium with the glazing at the stage between the auditorium and the sidewalk, and how we're avoiding outside distractions from interior presentations. We've had lots of interesting discussions with the library user group about how that auditorium is going to function. And in some ways, those distractions are kind of what we're hoping for, that we're hoping for this lively interaction. We do have a curtain system that is being designed so we can close it off if privacy is required, or if there becomes some kind of event that we want to close that off. But we really want to have that back and forth, and having kids run up and put their face on the glass and that's the kind of thing we want to see happening, and to have the library be this piece of curiosity that really draws people in. And I won't pretend like we don't have some naysayers that think, well, we're just going to have the curtains closed the whole time. That certainly has been something we've heard, but we also have some optimists that are really excited about the opportunities of how to have that indoor-outdoor connection.
Those were great.
Yeah, that'll be a really fun social experiment, just to see how how the audience reacts to that background and how the background reacts to the audience. It'll be interesting to see.
Patty, you were just saying something?
No, I was saying there's a great precedent for it in the original design of the Colosseum, where all of the curtains that would open, and there's the city in front of you. And it was a great way to relate the audience back to the city. And they had, as you know, curtains that would then close it on occasions. Yeah. And I think that the dramatic opportunity is terrific. Yeah. The same is true in the Mount Hood, the Mount Hood viewing pavilion, the most distant one. I can't remember what it's called. And they have the same thing. They'll show you the mountain and then they'll draw the curtains. And there it is. And I think being able to relate a civic space to the outdoors is tremendously important. It's important to remember where you are. It really is locating in an important way. Yeah, it's been really interesting series of conversations about privacy, not just for the auditorium, but the library in general, about privacy versus engagement. And back to that me and we value that we're trying to bring to the project, about how important is it to feel secure versus to feel like you can see beyond, and then also what's it like to be seen. And so trying to provide a variety of spaces where people can find their own comfort level is really important. And so we have those different types of spaces in the library, but the auditorium I really do think is going to be a bit of an experiment, and I'm excited to see how it turns out. Katie Odell, the deputy director for the library, keeps talking about when they do apparently at one of the libraries they do a pig pageant where they bring in pigs from a local farm and they dress them up in things and the kids vote on who their favorite pig is. And so she keeps talking about, are we going to have space for the pigs? And so I almost had to put that in this rendering, but we chose not to put the pig in the rendering. We're also, I just want to point out, the auditorium will have retractable seating, so it can also be a flat floor event space. And that's also part of our resiliency plan, is that the auditorium is the most secure, structurally secure part of the building. And so if there is if the great earthquake comes or something,
the auditorium can be a place, it's not, it's not like a category designed structurally, to the code for that, but it is more robust than the rest of the building, and in an emergency, it will be a place where people can gather.
Yeah, another comment about civic buildings. One of the big problems very often is that there are a lot of blank walls, and they are anti-personnel. I mean, they are repellent to the community you're trying to embrace.
Yeah.
So I think it's exactly the right thing to do, to put in these windows so that you have a sense of connection between what happens inside and what happens outside. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Interesting to think about what it looks like from the outside when the curtains are closed.
Yeah.
Is there a way to keep that from becoming a blank wall?
Right, yeah, we have done some renderings just to see what it looks like with the closed curtains, and during the day, it's not that noticeable. At night, it's very noticeable, and I think that, that's one of the things we're really interested in is when there's an after hours event, and there's an author talking, or there's a small play happening, being able to see in at night and see that activity, especially in our dreary winter months, that could be a really awesome experience. But then we also have to look at it, what happens if, okay, we don't want people looking in and they close the curtains.
Put on some kind of light show on the outside of
Yeah.
the curtains or something to keep it from becoming a blank wall.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Is there an estimation of like the timeline of?
Oh, we're in construction. We're digging now.
Okay.
Yeah, we're fast tracked, and so while we're finishing the construction documents, they're doing soil remediation on the site, and so we're not moving any columns. I can tell you that the column grid is set. We will be opening in late 2025.
I live like 5 minutes walks away from this, so.
Which way?
I'm next to Gresham High School on Main Street, so that's why when I saw it, I was like, I'm waiting for that maker space for so long.
Check out the Rockwood Makerspace.
I've been to actually
Yeah.
live there before, like
Oh, great.
being like tutor and stuff like that, but so I was like, Gresham, need once.
Yeah.
I don't wanna drive there, I wanna walk, so
Yeah.
this is great, so I'm
Sure.
waiting 2 more years, I can wait.
Great. Well,
This
thank
has
you all.
been really great. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Beautiful
generous.
place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our pleasure.
Are you headed back tomorrow?
Tomorrow morning, yeah.
Tomorrow morning?
Yeah.
Did you come for this or did you?
You guys here.
I'll take it, and I'll send it up.